It's late afternoon, the kind of time when the sky starts to turn a soft orange and the air cools ever so slightly. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Jasmine walks down the sidewalk, a small grocery bag in her right hand. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. Her feet shuffle softly on the pavement, the gentle sound of her steps blending with the distant hum of traffic. She looks around, soaking in the calm suburban atmosphere. The houses around her are modest, neatly kept, an image of peace. Jasmine's thoughts are quiet, almost peaceful. I should have grabbed a coffee, maybe a little something sweet, she thinks as she walks. But then, something starts to feel off. Maybe it's the way the wind picks up, ruffling her hair, or the sudden change in the temperature. She shivers slightly, pulling her jacket tighter around her. She pushes the feeling aside. After all, nothing's wrong, right? She's just walking home. But then, a faint sound, the low hum of an engine, interrupts her thoughts. She glances behind her. A police car is slowing down beside her. The sleek black and white cruiser comes to a stop, its tires lightly screeching as it halts on the side of the road. Jasmine stops walking. The hairs on the back of her neck stand up. The car door opens with a sharp squeak, and out steps Officer Mark Smith, a tall, well-built white man in his early 30s. His uniform is crisply pressed, the badge gleaming in the afternoon sun. His eyes meet Jasmine's, scanning her with a look that's unreadable, cold. He doesn't immediately say anything, just stands there for a moment, as if assessing her. Then, finally, he speaks. Officer Smith, in a low, authoritative voice, "Excuse me, ma'am." Jasmine stands still for a moment, her breath catching. Her eyes narrow slightly, but she keeps her voice steady. Jasmine, with a neutral tone, "Yes, officer?" "Officer Smith, where are you coming from?" His tone is more a demand than a question. Jasmine doesn't respond right away. She's surprised, thrown off. She was just minding her own business. Jasmine, slightly defensive, "I was just at the store, getting a few things." Officer Smith, with an edge, "What store?" Jasmine, hesitating, trying to remain calm, "Just the corner market." Officer Smith, ignoring the hesitation, "Where exactly is that?" Jasmine glances at the sidewalk, unsure. Why is he asking all these questions? It's just a routine stop, right? Her mind races. Jasmine, with a hint of frustration, "I don't see why it matters. I'm just walking home." The officer's eyes flicker to the grocery bag in her hand, and then to her face. There's a subtle change in his posture, almost like he's sizing her up. Officer Smith, after a pause, "You live around here?" Jasmine clenches her jaw. The questions are becoming intrusive, and she's starting to feel like she's being unfairly targeted. Jasmine, with growing irritation, "I really don't think that's any of your business." There's a long, uncomfortable silence between them. The sounds of the street around them seem to vanish as the tension rises. Officer Smith takes a step forward, closing the gap between them. The sound of his boots on the pavement echoes in the quiet. Jasmine instinctively steps back. Her heart begins to race as the space between them narrows. Jasmine, with a hint of panic, "I really don't think this is necessary, officer. I'm just trying to get home." But the officer doesn't move back. Instead, he steps forward again, slowly, deliberately. His body language becomes more imposing. Officer Smith, with an edge to his voice, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Jasmine can feel her chest tighten. She's not used to this. She's done nothing wrong, and yet she's being cornered. She looks around, hoping for someone to intervene. But the street is empty. Jasmine, voice trembling slightly, "I'm not trying to make anything hard. I just want to go home." The officer doesn't respond. Instead, he steps closer, the distance between them becoming uncomfortably small. Jasmine decides it's time to end this interaction. She takes a step back, then another, trying to walk around the officer. Jasmine, firmly, but with a rising sense of urgency, "I'm going to go now." But Officer Smith isn't having it. In one swift motion, he steps in front of her again, blocking her path. His eyes are cold, unblinking. Officer Smith, sharply, "I'm not done talking to you." Jasmine's breath catches in her throat. She looks up at him, trying to steady herself. She's being forced into a position she doesn't want to be in, and every instinct in her tells her to get away. Jasmine, pleading, "Please, I just want to go home. I'm not a threat to you." The officer crosses his arms, his expression hardening. The air feels thick, oppressive. "Officer Smith, I'm just doing my job, man. Where are you really coming from?" Jasmine stands there, frozen for a moment, trying to maintain composure. She can feel the heat rising in her chest, and her hands are starting to shake. She looks up at the officer, then glances down at the ground, trying to avoid eye contact. "Officer Smith," sharply, "you don't want to cooperate with me? Fine." The words are like a slap in the face. Jasmine doesn't know how to respond. She feels her stomach knot with unease. She hasn't done anything wrong. Why is he being so aggressive? Jasmine, quietly, "I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want to get home." Officer Smith, snapping, "Then stop being difficult. Where do you live?" Jasmine takes a deep breath, but she can't hold back the frustration anymore. Jasmine, loudly, "I'm not a criminal. I'm just walking home." The officer's eyes flash with irritation. Officer Smith, cutting her off, "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be." The officer takes a step back, then slowly places his hand on his belt. Jasmine's eyes widen as she watches his fingers hover near his pepper spray. Her mind races, and her heart begins to beat faster. "Jasmine," her voice rising, "what are you doing?" Officer Smith, calmly, but with an edge, "I'm giving you a warning." Jasmine steps back instinctively, her body tensing. She can feel the hot prickle of fear crawling up her spine. Jasmine, frantic, "You don't need to do that. I haven't done anything. I'm just trying to go home." The officer doesn't respond. His hand hovers over the canister, and for a brief moment, everything stands still. Jasmine, desperately, "Please, just let me go." But the officer's eyes are cold, unyielding. His stance, unshaken. Without warning, the officer pulls the pepper spray from his belt. Jasmine's heart drops to her stomach. Her breath catches in her throat. Jasmine, shocked, her voice trembling, "No, don't." But it's too late. With a quick motion, the officer points the spray directly at Jasmine's face and presses the nozzle. A sharp, burning mist shoots out, hitting her square in the eyes. Jasmine gasps. Her hands fly to her face as the pain explodes in her head. Her vision blurs instantly. She stumbles backward, choking and gasping for air. Jasmine, screaming, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" The world around her becomes a blur of agony. The burn is unbearable, her face on fire. Tears fill her eyes, mixing with the spray. Her hands are shaking as she wipes desperately at her face, but nothing helps. She can barely see, can barely breathe. Jasmine, crying out, stumbling backward, "Help! Someone, please help me." The officer stands there, unmoved. His gaze is cold, almost mechanical. Officer Smith, calmly, as though indifferent to her pain, "Stay down." Jasmine collapses to the ground, her body trembling, her vision swimming. The sidewalk feels like it's spinning beneath her. She can't breathe, can't see, can't think, and all she can hear is the distant sound of her own screams as the world around her fades into darkness. The world feels like it's tilting. Jasmine can't breathe. She can't see. Her eyes sting with the searing pain of the pepper spray, and her throat feels like it's closing in. She's on the ground, trembling. Her body feels heavy, as though the weight of her fear is suffocating her. She tries to wipe her face with her sleeve, but her hands are shaking too badly to be effective. The burning sensation doesn't stop. She gasps for air, choking on the agony. Her chest rises and falls erratically. The pain in her eyes is so intense it's almost unbearable. She tries to lift herself off the pavement but collapses back down, her vision still blurry. Jasmine, between coughs, hoarse, Why are you doing this? Officer Smith, calmly, without a hint of empathy, you should have cooperated. His voice is distant, almost clinical, as though the whole thing is routine, something he's done 100 times before. Jasmine's heart races, a mixture of panic and disbelief. She's helpless. She needs help. She barely hears the distant sound of footsteps approaching. A soft voice calls out. Maria, an older black woman, walking her dog down the street, notices the commotion. She stops dead in her tracks, her eyes wide in shock as she takes in the scene. She sees the officer standing over Jasmine, who is still kneeling on the pavement, her face raw and red from the pepper spray. Maria, yelling, furious. What the hell are you doing to that woman? The officer looks up, momentarily startled by the interruption, but he doesn't back off. Instead, he turns his attention to Maria. Officer Smith, irritated, nothing to worry about, man. Move along. Maria, shouting, move along? You just sprayed her with pepper spray. She walks briskly toward the officer, her face twisted with righteous anger. She pulls out her phone and starts recording the scene. Jasmine, weakly, help please. Maria immediately crouches beside Jasmine, her hand on her shoulder, trying to comfort her. Maria, softly to Jasmine, it's okay, baby. I got you. Just breathe. All right? I'm gonna help you. She gently tries to support Jasmine's trembling body, moving her away from the officer's reach. The officer steps forward again, blocking Maria's path. His voice turns cold, and his posture becomes more menacing as he towers over her. Officer Smith, harshly, I said move along, ma'am. You don't want to get involved in this. Maria, firmly, unyielding, you've already involved me, officer. This woman is hurt, and I'm not going anywhere until you do the right thing. The officer glances at the phone in her hand and then back at Jasmine, who is still gasping for air. His face twists in frustration, but he doesn't take his eyes off Maria. Officer Smith, snapping, I'm doing my job. She wouldn't cooperate. Maria, shaking her head, incredulous. Cooperate? She was just walking home. Officer Smith, defensively, she's not above the law. She was acting suspicious. We have procedures. Maria, sarcastic, procedures? Your procedure is to attack people for no reason? The officer looks briefly at Jasmine, who is still crumpled on the ground, trying to breathe. He's quiet for a moment, as though considering the situation, but then he straightens, his stance unfaltering. Officer Smith, gritting his teeth, you're obstructing justice. I'll take care of this. He reaches for his radio on his belt and starts speaking into it, his eyes never leaving Maria. The officer's voice is low but authoritative as he radios in for backup. Officer Smith, into the radio. Need assistance here at the corner of Maple and 7th. Suspect uncooperative, refusing to identify herself. Stand by for further instructions. His tone is businesslike, as if he's reporting on any other incident. Despite the human distress in front of him, Jasmine can barely make out the sound of the radio as the fog in her vision grows thicker. Maria, under her breath, to herself, uncooperative? She's not uncooperative, she's in pain. Maria continues to keep a hand on Jasmine, gently stroking her hair to comfort her. Jasmine, though still struggling to breathe, manages a weak smile at the small act of kindness. But the burn in her eyes doesn't stop. She can still feel the searing heat eating away at her skin. Jasmine, weakly, through gritted teeth, please, water, anything. Maria, to the officer, can't you at least give her some water? Officer Smith, coldly, I'm not here to babysit. A few moments later, a handful of people begin to gather on the street. The sound of whispers and murmurs fills the air. People peek from behind windows, walk slowly past, and stop to watch the confrontation. The presence of witnesses makes the situation feel heavier, and Jasmine can feel the weight of every pair of eyes on her, though her vision is still blurred. Witness number 1. To a neighbor whispering, did he just spray her with pepper spray? What's going on? Witness number 2. Quietly unsure, I don't know. It looked like he was questioning her, and then, boom, he just sprayed her. Maria sees the small crowd beginning to form and raises her voice. Maria, shouting to the crowd, she's hurt. He needs to call an ambulance. This isn't right. More people stop, a few of them taking out their phones, recording the scene. The presence of onlookers seems to rattle the officer. He glares at them, clearly agitated by the growing number of witnesses. Jasmine finally manages to sit up, though her body trembles uncontrollably. She wipes her face with the sleeve of her jacket, but the spray still burns, and her vision is barely improving. Jasmine, hoarsely, please, I need help, please. Her voice cracks, and she looks up at Maria, her eyes bloodshot and desperate. Maria gently takes her hand, trying to keep her calm. Maria, soothing, I'm here, honey. You're gonna be okay. Just breathe. But Jasmine's breaths are shallow, ragged. Her entire body feels like it's on fire, and she starts to tremble more violently. Jasmine, pleading, I just want to go home. Please, someone, anyone. The officer seems to hesitate for a moment, his gaze shifting from Jasmine to the small crowd now gathered around them. He looks at the phones raised in the air and the people murmuring, his sense of control slipping. A second patrol car pulls up. Officer Reynolds, a black woman, steps out. She's calm and collected, surveying the scene. She glances at the officers standing over Jasmine in the small crowd gathering. Officer Reynolds, softly, looking at Jasmine. What happened here? Officer Smith, irritated, defensive. She was being uncooperative. I had to spray her. She wasn't answering my questions. Officer Reynolds, nodding, looking at Jasmine. And now? Officer Smith, agitated. She's making a scene. I'm trying to get her ID. Officer Reynolds, to Jasmine, ma'am, are you all right? Jasmine, weakly, no, I'm not okay. Officer Reynolds, turning to Officer Smith, we need to call an ambulance now. For the first time, the officer's resolve cracks. He looks around at the crowd and then back at his partner. Officer Reynolds, with authority, you've done enough. Get her some medical help. As the ambulance arrives, Jasmine is carefully helped onto a stretcher. The crowd remains silent, still recording, watching as paramedics attend to her. The officer, who had been so certain of his authority, now stands by, uncomfortably silent, as his actions are scrutinized. Maria stays by Jasmine's side, holding her hand as she's loaded into the ambulance. Her face softens, relieved to see her moving, though she knows Jasmine's fight is far from over. Maria, to Jasmine softly, you're gonna be all right. We're gonna get you through this. Jasmine, still in pain but feeling a glimmer of hope, manages a faint nod. The doors of the ambulance close, and the siren wails as it drives away, leaving the street empty again. And Officer Smith, standing in the background, knows the story he's told will never be the same in the eyes of the people who saw it. The sterile, cold air of the police station fills the room. The buzz of fluorescent lights creates an unnerving hum in the background. Officer Smith sits at his desk, staring at the incident report on his computer screen. His fingers hover over the keyboard, but he doesn't type. His mind is elsewhere. He rubs his eyes, the exhaustion from the incident evident in his posture. Officer Smith, muttering to himself, she wouldn't cooperate. It was for her own safety. He presses a few keys, but the words on the screen don't seem to come together. His thoughts are clouded with the image of Jasmine on the ground, her face contorted in pain, crying out for help, but he brushes it aside. He's done his job, right? He glances at the clock on the wall. It's nearly 8 p.m. The station is quieter now, the rush of the day starting to die down. A knock at the door breaks his train of thought. Officer Reynolds, entering. Got a minute? Officer Smith, leaning back in his chair, sighing, yeah, what's up? Officer Reynolds, standing by the door, arms crossed, we need to talk about what happened earlier today. Officer Reynolds, with a hard edge, I've reviewed the video, and I've been talking to some of the witnesses. The way you handled that woman, it wasn't right. Smith doesn't look up from his desk. He runs a hand through his hair, tension rising in his shoulders. Officer Smith, defensive. I did what I had to do. She was being uncooperative, and I had to use force to de-escalate the situation. Officer Reynolds, shaking her head, that's not what happened. You sprayed her with pepper spray when she was clearly trying to walk away. Smith looks up, meeting her gaze. There's frustration in his eyes, but underneath it is something else, doubt. Officer Smith, sharply, she wasn't following my instructions. She could have just answered my questions and gone on her way. Officer Reynolds, pausing carefully, you don't get to decide who deserves to be treated like that. She was just a woman walking home. You didn't even give her a chance to explain. Smith stands up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. He walks to the window and looks outside, avoiding her gaze. Officer Smith, quietly, I didn't have a choice. I'm just doing my job. Officer Reynolds, calm but firm, you're not supposed to act out of anger or frustration. You should be acting out of reason. Smith's back is to her, but he's tense, his fists clenching at his sides. Officer Reynolds, softly, if I were in her shoes, I'd be scared too. After a long silence, Officer Reynolds steps closer to Smith's desk. She picks up the incident report in front of him. Officer Reynolds, we need to update this. The way you've written it, it doesn't match the reality of what happened. You've painted her as the aggressor. That's not the truth. Smith stares at the report for a moment, conflicted. The words feel distant, almost foreign. The report is his version of events, but he knows deep down something feels wrong. Officer Smith, hesitant, I don't know. Officer Reynolds, pressing, you know what happened. You need to be honest about it. The truth matters. Smith slams his fist on the desk, frustrated. Officer Smith, what? You want me to admit I messed up? That I overreacted? Officer Reynolds, calmly, it's not about admitting mistakes. It's about accountability. You can't just walk away from this. Not when someone's life is at stake. Smith looks at her, his face contorting with confusion, anger, and something deeper, guilt. Officer Smith, defeated, I was just doing my job. Officer Reynolds, softly, and you did it wrong, but you can make it right. Smith doesn't respond. He stands there, frozen, as though wrestling with the weight of his actions. The next morning, Maria walks into the police station, determination in her step. She has an appointment with the department's internal affairs office. She's been making phone calls, writing letters, pushing for an investigation into the incident. She enters the building, walking past the front desk, where the receptionist looks at her with some surprise. Maria, with purpose, I need to speak with someone about the incident involving the officer yesterday. Jasmine Smith. The receptionist hesitates, but then nods. Receptionist, I'll get someone. Please take a seat. Maria waits, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The walls of the station feel cold, indifferent. As she sits, she thinks about the events of the day before, about the pain she saw in Jasmine's eyes and the helplessness she felt in the moment. Maria wasn't just a bystander. She's been a part of this fight for years. And now, she's ready to do whatever it takes. Officer Daniels, a middle-aged black man with graying hair, leads Maria into a small, stark room for the interview. There's a table between them, and Maria sits down across from him, her face resolute. Officer Daniels, gentle but direct, I'm here to hear your side of the story, ma'am. What exactly happened yesterday? Maria takes a deep breath. She has to stay calm, even though the anger is still bubbling just under the surface. She recounts the incident, speaking with clarity and passion. Maria, firmly, she was just walking home. That officer, he didn't give her a chance. He provoked her. She wasn't being uncooperative. He just decided to escalate the situation. Officer Daniels, listening intently, and when you intervened, you said the officer was aggressive? Maria, nodding, he didn't want anyone getting involved. He told me to move along, but I couldn't just stand there while he hurt her. I've seen this before. I wasn't gonna let it happen again. Maria's voice trembles a little now, the weight of the injustice pressing down on her. Maria, Jasmine was in pain. She didn't deserve that. Officer Daniels, after a pause, Looking at his notes, I've seen the video. It's troubling, to say the least. I'll ensure the investigation proceeds. Maria nods, her face hardening. Maria, with conviction, good, because I won't stop until someone is held accountable. At the hospital, Jasmine sits in a sterile room, a doctor examining her. The burn in her eyes has subsided, but the psychological toll remains. She feels shaken, violated in a way she can't describe. Doctor, gently, you're doing better, Jasmine. But the trauma you've endured, it's not just physical. The emotional and psychological effects of this incident can last a while. How are you feeling? Jasmine's eyes wander to the window, the sunlight pouring in. She's quiet, contemplating the doctor's words. Jasmine, softly, I feel small, like it didn't matter, like I didn't matter. The doctor nods, offering a comforting smile. Doctor, you matter. Your voice matters. And what happened to you matters. You don't have to go through this alone. Jasmine's breath hitches as she feels the weight of it all. She's not just a statistic. She's a person, and she's allowed to be angry, allowed to be hurt. Jasmine, now back home, sits at her kitchen table. The phone rings, and it's Maria. Jasmine answers it. Maria, gently, hey, how are you doing? Jasmine, sighing, the weight of the situation settling in. I don't know, Maria. I don't know how to move past this. Maria, you don't have to move past it alone. I'm helping you, and you should speak up. You deserve to be heard. Jasmine thinks about it for a long moment. The sting in her eyes may have faded, but the wound, the injustice, is still fresh. Jasmine, softly, what if they don't listen? What if nothing changes? Maria, they have to listen, and you deserve the chance to make them. There's a pause. Jasmine takes a breath, her voice gaining strength. Jasmine, okay, I'm ready. Let's do this. Jasmine and Maria meet at a coffee shop. They sit down at a table, and Maria pulls out a folder filled with papers, medical reports, witness statements, recordings from the scene. Jasmine takes it all in. Maria, this is just the beginning, Jasmine. The department will try to discredit you, try to make you feel like this was your fault. But we have to stay strong. We have the evidence, and we're not backing down. Jasmine nods, determined now. She picks up a pen, ready to add her own voice to the fight. Jasmine, resolutely, I'm not backing down either. I won't let them silence me. As they continue to plan, there's shared determination filling the space between them. The fight for justice is just beginning. The scene opens with the bright lights of a TV studio. Reporter Kate Williams, the seasoned news anchor, speaks to the camera with a serious expression. Behind her, a screen displays a still image of Jasmine, her face bruised and red from the pepper spray, taken from the viral video. The text beneath reads, "Woman sprayed by officer in controversial arrest." Reporter Kate Williams, with urgency, "Good evening. In a disturbing incident caught on video, a black woman in Brooklyn was sprayed with pepper gas by an officer during what witnesses say was an unprovoked confrontation. The woman, identified as Jasmine Smith, was reportedly walking home when the officer approached her. What ensued has sparked a wave of outrage from the local community and beyond. Cut to footage of the video taken by Maria, showing the officer spraying Jasmine, followed by shots of protest in the streets and people holding signs that read, "Justice for Jasmine and accountability now." Reporter Kate Williams, the officer, identified as Officer Smith, has not yet responded to the allegations, but sources within the police department confirm an internal investigation is underway. Meanwhile, citizens across the city have taken to the streets in protest, demanding transparency and justice for the victim. The faces of protesters shouting slogans, carrying signs, and marching with palpable energy. The frustration and anger in the crowd are evident, and their voices rise in unison, chanting, protesters, loudly, "No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace." Reporter Kate Williams, voiceover, while some argue for due process, others are calling for immediate action, including the officer's suspension pending investigation. The question remains, was this an isolated incident, or is it part of a larger pattern of excessive force? For now, The story is unfolding, and it's clear this is far from over. Cut to a quiet living room. Jasmine, now out of the hospital, sits with Maria beside her. The room is dimly lit, and Jasmine seems calm, though she carries the weight of what's happened. There's a news crew setting up in front of her for an interview, but Jasmine hesitates. She looks to Maria for support. Jasmine, softly, I don't know if I can do this, Maria. What if they don't believe me? Maria, gently, Jasmine, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You are telling the truth, and your truth is important. Jasmine looks up, meeting Maria's eyes, the weight of the situation pressing on her. She takes a deep breath and nods. The camera crew is ready. Jasmine's expression hardens with resolve as she looks into the lens. Jasmine, calmly, but with strength, I was just walking home. I didn't deserve what happened to me. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a threat. I'm a human being. I want people to understand that. The words come out with a rawness, but a quiet power. She lets the silence linger for a moment, letting the weight of her statement hang in the air. Jasmine, with conviction, I want justice. Not just for me, but for everyone who's been treated like this. It needs to stop. The camera zooms in on her face as she finishes, showing the sincerity and pain in her eyes. Later that afternoon, a press conference in front of City Hall. The mayor, a well-dressed, polished figure, stands at the podium, flanked by his aides. Reporters crowd around, microphones raised. Reporter 1, questioning, Mr. Mayor, given the outrage surrounding this incident, what actions are you taking to ensure accountability? The mayor straightens, taking a deep breath before responding. Mayor, calmly, we take these allegations seriously. An internal investigation is already underway. We are working with the police department to ensure that justice is served. The public deserves transparency, and we are committed to providing it. His words sound measured, almost rehearsed, as if he's reading from a script. The reporters continue to press him. Reporter 2, firmly, but Mayor, what about the video? The public is demanding more than just an investigation. They want the officers suspended. Will you take action? The mayor pauses, his eyes flicking over the crowd. He tries to maintain his composure, but his hands twitch slightly. Mayor, hesitant, the matter is under review. We need to let the investigation run its course. The crowd murmurs, not satisfied. The tension in the air is palpable, and a few reporters exchange glances. The mayor, sensing the growing frustration, ends the conference abruptly. The protest scenes from earlier continue, but now the camera focuses on Jasmine's neighborhood, Brooklyn, where a large group of local residents have gathered for a peaceful demonstration. The streets are filled with people of all ages, their voices loud and unified. The signs say, Justice for Jasmine and Black Lives Matter. Maria stands among the crowd, holding a sign with Jasmine's face on it. She's joined by a diverse group of people, many of whom are neighbors and friends. The energy is intense, but there is a sense of unity, of solidarity. A few blocks away, Officer Smith and a colleague drive past the protest, their expressions tense. Smith glances at the group, clearly uncomfortable. His colleague notices the unease. Colleague, quietly, you okay? Officer Smith, through gritted teeth, I didn't ask for this. It's just a bunch of people trying to make a scene. But despite his attempt to downplay it, the unease is palpable. He's feeling the pressure, and it's clear from his body language that the growing public outcry is starting to affect him. In a sleek, modern office building, Jasmine and Maria sit across from Attorney Williams, the seasoned civil rights lawyer. The walls are lined with books and legal texts, but it's the walls that matter the most today. Attorney Williams, seriously, I'm going to be blunt with you, Jasmine. We've got a long road ahead, but you're not alone in this. We have an opportunity here to make a real change, not just for you, but for everyone who's ever had to endure this kind of injustice. Jasmine nods, though the weight of the legal battle ahead is clear in her eyes. Jasmine, softly, I want to make sure no one else goes through what I did. Attorney Williams, nodding, that's the spirit. We'll gather all the evidence, speak to witnesses, and use every resource we have to make sure this doesn't just go away. The lawyer hands them a file, and Maria flips it open, seeing the list of steps they'll take to build the case. It's daunting, but Maria's expression is one of determination. Back in the police station, Officer Smith sits in the same office as before, staring at the same incident report. He's trying to write, but his mind keeps drifting back to the video. He watches it again, the footage of Jasmine, her eyes wild in pain, her body collapsing onto the ground. The sound of her cries seems to echo in the quiet room. His phone buzzes. It's a text from a fellow officer. "You see the protests? People are pissed. You need to be careful. They're calling for your suspension." Smith stares at the phone for a long time, biting his lip. He's never felt this level of pressure before. Officer Smith, muttering to himself, "I was just doing my job," but the words feel hollow now. He leans back in his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. The weight of his actions is sinking in. Later that night, Maria and Jasmine sit at the kitchen table, reviewing documents. Jasmine's fingers trace the lines of text, her mind processing the weight of the fight ahead. Maria, encouragingly, "You're doing the right thing. People are listening, and we're going to make sure your voice is heard." Jasmine nods, but her eyes betray the fear she feels. Jasmine, softly, "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this." Maria, reassuringly, "You are. You're stronger than you think. This is about more than just you. It's about all of us. And we're in this together." Jasmine's eyes meet Maria's, the unspoken bond between them stronger than ever. They both know this fight is far from over, but they are ready for what's next. Next day, a large rally in the heart of the city. Jasmine is on stage, standing beside Maria and Attorney Williams. The crowd in front of them is large, passionate, and loud. Jasmine takes the microphone. She looks out at the sea of people, her voice shaking at first but then growing in strength. Jasmine, loud and clear, "We are here because we refuse to be silenced. We are here for justice, for accountability, and we won't stop until we get it." The crowd erupts in cheers, their energy rising in unison. The scene is powerful, the resolve clear. The fight is only just beginning. The camera opens on the somber atmosphere of a law office, where Attorney Williams and Jasmine are seated at a conference table. Piles of documents are scattered before them, and a whiteboard behind them is filled with notes and evidence. Maria sits beside Jasmine, her presence a constant source of support. Attorney Williams, firmly, "Jasmine, this is going to be a battle. The officer has a team of lawyers who will do everything they can to discredit your testimony. But we've got solid evidence. The video, the medical reports, and the witness statements are key." Jasmine listens intently, her face a mask of determination but also anxiety. She's still processing the enormity of what's happening. Attorney Williams, continuing, "But we need to be ready for their tactics. They'll likely attack your credibility, paint you as someone who was antagonizing the officer. We need you to stay calm, stick to the facts, and stay firm on your experience." Jasmine nods, but her hands tremble slightly as she picks up a document. Maria places a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Maria, softly, "You've got this, Jasmine. You're telling the truth. That's all that matters." The courtroom is filled with tension. Jasmine sits at the witness stand, her face composed but her hands gripping the edges of the podium. Attorney Williams stands beside her, offering quiet words of encouragement. The opposing defense lawyer, Richard Collins, stands across from them, watching Jasmine with a critical eye. The judge, an older man with glasses, raises his gavel. "Judge, firmly, we will begin. Miss Smith, please state your account of the events that transpired on the evening in question." Jasmine takes a deep breath and begins her testimony, speaking clearly and steadily. Jasmine, calmly, "I was walking home from work. I had just crossed the street when Officer Smith stopped me. He didn't tell me why he was stopping me. I tried to walk away, but he grabbed my arm, and I asked him to let go. He didn't. I was scared, and then he sprayed me in the face with pepper spray." The defense lawyer, Richard Collins, interrupts immediately. Richard Collins, smoothly, "Objection, Your Honor. She's speculating about the officer's intentions. We request she sticks to the facts. Judge, nodding, sustained. Stick to the events, Miss Smith. Please focus on what you experienced. Jasmine looks to Attorney Williams, who gives her a small nod of encouragement. Jasmine, composed, he sprayed me. I couldn't breathe. I was on the ground. People tried to help me, but he wouldn't let them. The defense lawyer now stands up and addresses the jury, his voice calm but assertive. Richard Collins, addressing the jury, ladies and gentlemen, the defendant's actions on that day were not those of an innocent person trying to walk home. The video clearly shows Miss Smith resisting the officer's attempts to question her. And when she did not comply, the officer used the pepper spray as a reasonable and necessary means to subdue a potentially dangerous suspect. Jasmine flinches at the accusation, but she holds her ground. Attorney Williams leans in, speaking quietly. Attorney Williams, whispering, don't react. Just stick to your story. After the morning session, the camera shifts to the outside of the courthouse, where a media frenzy has erupted. News reporters rush to get statements from witnesses, the legal team, and anyone involved in the case. Maria walks beside Jasmine, both of them surrounded by reporters. Reporter 1, shouting over the noise, Jasmine, how are you holding up with all the pressure? Do you think you'll win this case? Jasmine hesitates for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. But she answers with conviction. Jasmine, firmly, I'm here because this is bigger than just me. It's about accountability, it's about justice, and it's about making sure no one else has to go through what I did. The reporters swarm around them, capturing every word. Maria walks beside her, offering a sense of protection in the midst of the chaos. Maria, quietly, you did good. The courtroom is again silent as Officer Smith takes the stand. He's in full uniform, his expression stoic but his body language stiff. He glances at Jasmine briefly but avoids direct eye contact. Defense lawyer Richard Collins, leading, Officer Smith, can you describe what happened on the evening of the incident? Smith clears his throat before speaking. Officer Smith, carefully, I stopped Miss Smith because she was acting suspicious. She didn't comply with my instructions. When I asked her to stop, she began walking away, and I felt she was being evasive. She then became verbally aggressive when I tried to engage with her. The defense lawyer nods, encouraging his witness. Richard Collins, and at what point did you decide to use the pepper spray? Officer Smith, looking down, when she started to turn away from me and refused to answer my questions, I used the spray. It was a precautionary measure. I felt threatened by her behavior. The courtroom falls into a heavy silence. Attorney Williams rises to cross-examine. Attorney Williams, calmly, Officer Smith, you claim Miss Smith was acting suspicious, but can you explain what specifically about her behavior made you feel threatened? Was she armed? Was she physically aggressive? Smith hesitates, looking around as if trying to find his footing. Officer Smith, stumbling, no, she wasn't armed, but, Attorney Williams, interrupting, but you still decided that spraying her was necessary? Smith hesitates before nodding. Officer Smith, yes, because she wasn't complying. Attorney Williams, pointedly, and how much time did you give her to comply before you used pepper spray? Smith's eyes flicker nervously. He looks down, his confidence fading. Officer Smith, it was immediate, but I felt it was necessary. Attorney Williams, you didn't give her a chance to explain herself, did you? Smith doesn't respond. The tension in the courtroom is thick as the jury watches closely. Attorney Williams presses further. Attorney Williams, did you at any point assess the situation to see if there were other ways to resolve it without using force? Or was your first instinct to use pepper spray? Smith falters, clearly unprepared for the line of questioning. Officer Smith, I didn't think of it that way. After the trial session ends for the day, Jasmine sits alone in a small room inside the courthouse. She leans against the wall, her eyes closed, exhausted. Maria enters and sits beside her. Maria, gently, Jasmine, you're doing great. We're almost there. Jasmine opens her eyes and glances at her friend, a faint, tired smile crossing her face. Jasmine, softly, I don't know if I can keep doing this. They're making me sound like the enemy. It hurts. Maria places a hand on her shoulder, her expression firm and resolute. Maria, encouraging, the truth is on your side. You're not the enemy. You're a person who deserves respect, and we're fighting for that. We'll get through this. Jasmine looks at Maria for a long moment, her eyes filled with both doubt and hope. Jasmine, quietly, I don't want to go back to who I was before this. I don't want to be scared anymore. Maria nods, squeezing her hand. Maria, you're not going back, Jasmine. You're only moving forward. And I'm right here with you. The story transitions to the jury room. The camera focuses on the faces of the jurors, a mix of different backgrounds and experiences as they deliberate. Some are quiet, others are speaking in hushed tones. Juror 1, hesitant. I don't understand why the officer felt the need to spray her like that. He didn't even give her a chance to explain. But I also don't want to jump to conclusions. Juror 2, nodding, yeah, but if we only go by the video, it doesn't show the whole story. What if she was being aggressive? We need to look at all angles. Juror 3, frustrated, but we saw the video, and there's nothing there that justifies using force like that. He could have handled it better. She wasn't a threat. Juror 4, sighing, it's complicated. But one thing's clear. He had options before spraying her. He didn't even try to de-escalate. The deliberation continues, with tension building as they try to reach a verdict. Later that evening, Jasmine is at home, staring at herself in the mirror. The stress of the trial has taken its toll, and she looks worn out. She touches her face where the pepper spray had burned, the memory still fresh. She hears a knock at the door, and it's Maria, holding a small bag of takeout. Maria, smiling warmly, I thought you could use a break. Jasmine smiles faintly, her exhaustion palpable. Jasmine, sighing, I don't know if I'm strong enough for all this. The pressure's too much. Maria sets the bag down on the counter and walks over, placing a hand on Jasmine's shoulder. Maria, softly, you're stronger than you think, and we're almost there. You don't have to do this alone. Jasmine looks up at her friend, a silent exchange of trust and determination passing between them. The courtroom is packed. The tension is thick in the air. Jasmine, Maria, and Attorney Williams wait with bated breath as the jury files back into the courtroom. The judge calls for silence. Judge, clearing his throat, has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman of the jury stands, holding the piece of paper in his hands. He looks at the judge, then at the room full of eyes. Jury foreman, slowly, we have, Your Honor. The camera cuts to Jasmine, her heart racing. Jury foreman, reading, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty of excessive use of force in the case of Jasmine Smith. The room erupts into a mix of relief, shock, and applause. Jasmine looks up at Maria, tears of relief welling in her eyes. Next day on Jasmine's apartment, the soft morning light streaming through the windows. She stands in front of a small mirror, applying makeup to cover the scars and bruises from the pepper spray attack. It's a quiet, intimate moment. The sound of birds chirping outside fills the room. Her phone buzzes on the counter, and she picks it up. It's a message from Maria. You did it. I'm so proud of you. Let's grab coffee later. I'll be there in 30. Jasmine smiles faintly, a sense of relief washing over her. As she puts the phone down, she stares at her reflection for a moment longer, as if looking for the woman she used to be. But this time, she doesn't turn away. Jasmine and Maria, sitting across from each other in a cozy coffee shop, they are surrounded by the soft hum of conversation and clinking mugs. Maria, beaming, the press conference was amazing. You handled it so well, Jasmine. The victory is only the beginning. Jasmine, nodding, taking a deep breath. It feels like a weight has been lifted, but it doesn't feel like enough, you know? There's so much more to do. Maria, seriously, and there will be. This isn't just about you anymore. It's about every person who's been hurt, ignored, or mistreated by a system that was supposed to protect them. You've started something bigger than this case. Jasmine takes a sip of her coffee, considering Maria's words. There's a long pause as she contemplates her journey. Jasmine, determined, I'm not stopping here. This isn't just about one officer. This is about a system that needs to change. I'm going to make sure it changes. Maria smiles at her, proud but also concerned for her friend's resolve. Next, a large press conference room. Jasmine stands at the podium in front of a sea of reporters, flashing cameras and microphones. Behind her, a banner reads, Justice for All, Accountability in Policing. The mood is one of cautious optimism, and Jasmine's voice rings out, clear and strong. Her confidence has grown since the trial, and she speaks with purpose. Jasmine, addressing the crowd, we've won the first battle, but this is not the end. This case has opened our eyes to the real issues that need to be addressed. It's about systemic reform. It's about accountability, transparency, and ensuring that no one else has to go through what I did. The camera pans to the reporters, their pens flying as they document her words. A few protesters are visible in the background, holding signs that read, End Police Brutality and Accountability for All Officers. Jasmine, continuing, we need real change, not just in policies, but in how we treat each other, how we see each other, and how we listen to those who have been silenced for too long. I won't stop fighting until we get that. There is applause from the crowd, a collective wave of support and solidarity. Maria, standing off to the side, smiles at Jasmine's strength. Jasmine has found her voice, and it's louder than ever. Later that evening, a meeting room filled with local activists, policy experts, and lawyers. Jasmine and Maria sit at the front, listening intently as a community organizer addresses the group. Community organizer, passionately, Jasmine, your case has sparked something bigger than we could have imagined. People are paying attention, and now we have to make sure that attention turns into action. We need to push for changes in training, transparency, and independent oversight for all law enforcement. Jasmine looks around the room, taking in the diverse group of people gathered for the cause. Their faces are a mixture of determination and hope, and for the first time, she feels like she's truly part of something that can make a difference. Jasmine, nodding, this isn't just about one officer anymore. It's about making sure this doesn't happen again. It's about making sure we're not silenced when we speak up. The group breaks into discussion, strategizing their next steps. Jasmine and Maria exchange glances. Their work is just beginning, and the road ahead will be long and challenging. But they are ready. At the police station, where Officer Smith is seen walking into a meeting with his superior, Captain Matthews. He's wearing a suit now, looking uncomfortable and out of place in the corporate setting. Captain Matthews sits behind a large desk, his expression unreadable. Captain Matthews, coldly, Officer Smith, based on the jury's verdict and the findings of the department's investigation, you are being placed on administrative leave pending further review. We cannot allow the actions that occurred to go without consequence. Smith stiffens, his face a mixture of disbelief and anger. Officer Smith, defensively, I was just doing my job. I didn't deserve this. Captain Matthews, without emotion, you may have been following protocol, but your actions have sparked a serious concern about the use of force within our department. The public and the community deserve better. Smith stands up, clearly struggling to contain his frustration. Officer Smith, under his breath, this isn't over. The scene ends with Smith exiting the office, the weight of his actions and the consequences of his choices hanging over him. Back in Jasmine's apartment, she and Maria sit on the couch, flipping through news articles and social media posts that highlight the growing movement surrounding her case. There are now rallies, petitions, and public forums discussing police reform and accountability. Maria, pointing to her phone, look at this. Your case has made it to national news. There are protests in other cities now. People are listening. Jasmine glances at the screen, her face a mix of awe and disbelief. Jasmine, quietly, I didn't know it would get this big. I didn't know my voice could make a difference. Maria, smiling, your voice is doing more than making a difference. It's changing the conversation. Jasmine smiles, a sense of purpose settling over her. She picks up her phone and begins typing a message. Jasmine, typing, We won this fight, but there's more to do. We're not stopping now." She hit send, her resolve stronger than ever. Next day at a bustling city street, where a massive protest is underway. There are hundreds of people marching, waving signs that read "Reform Now" and "Justice for Jasmine." At the front of the march, Jasmine walks alongside Maria, her face illuminated with hope. The atmosphere is one of collective strength and unity. Jasmine, yelling over the noise, "We're not done yet. We won't stop until we see real change." The crowd cheers in agreement. The march winds through the streets, past the courthouse, and toward the police station. As they approach, a line of officers stands in front, their faces stoic. But this time, the power dynamic feels different. The protesters are in control, their voices loud and unapologetic. Maria, smiling at Jasmine, "Look at this. We've got the people behind us. We've started something, Jasmine." Jasmine looks out at the crowd, a sense of pride swelling in her chest. She's not just a victim anymore. She's a catalyst for change. Later that day, Jasmine, sitting alone in her apartment later that night, she gazes out the window, the city lights sparkling in the distance. There's a quiet determination in her eyes. The weight of the journey ahead is still heavy, but she knows she's not alone anymore. Her phone buzzes again, this time with a message from Attorney Williams. "We're getting meetings with lawmakers next week. It's time to push for real reform." Jasmine smiles to herself and types back, "I'm ready." As she looks out the window, her reflection in the glass mirrors the woman she's becoming. A leader, a voice for change, and someone who will stop at nothing to make a difference. Next day, in a congressional hearing room, a stark contrast to the earlier courtroom. Jasmine, dressed in a professional suit, sits at a table surrounded by lawmakers, including Senator Thompson, an older, seasoned politician with a reputation for his focus on criminal justice reform. Attorney Williams sits next to her, offering subtle nods of encouragement. The camera zooms in on Jasmine, who is calm but resolute. This is a new battleground, one of policy, influence, and systemic change. Senator Thompson speaks first, addressing the room and the gathered press. Senator Thompson, loudly, "We are here today to address one of the most pressing issues of our time, the need for accountability in law enforcement. As we speak, families, communities, and individuals across this country are asking for justice. And today, we begin to answer." Jasmine stands, microphone in hand, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Jasmine, passionately, "I stand before you today not just for myself, but for every individual who has been hurt by a system that was supposed to protect them. The video of my attack, the scars on my face, the fear in my heart, none of that is new. For so many people, this is just another chapter in a story that has been written for generations." The faces of the senators and the audience in the room, some nodding, others visibly moved by Jasmine's words. Jasmine, continuing, "I was one of the lucky ones. I survived. But there are thousands of others who didn't. Thousands of lives lost to a system that turns a blind eye to abuse. We need to hold law enforcement accountable, not just in isolated cases, but across the board. We need oversight, transparency, and a commitment to de-escalation in every encounter." The room falls silent, the gravity of her words weighing heavily on everyone present. Senator Thompson leans forward, his voice filled with sincerity. "Senator Thompson, softly, you're right, and we will make this a priority." Next day, a massive protest happening in a major city. Thousands of people fill the streets, chanting slogans like "Justice for All" and "End Police Brutality." The protesters march past city landmarks, holding signs and banners with images of Jasmine and other victims of police violence. Maria, now actively involved in organizing, leads the march, carrying a large sign that reads, "The movement is stronger than ever." Behind her, Jasmine walks proudly, surrounded by her supporters. The camera pans to the crowd, highlighting the diverse faces of people from all walks of life. There are young children, older adults, and families walking side by side. Jasmine, addressing the crowd, shouting, "We are here today because we will not let fear control us. We will not let injustice stand anymore." This is the beginning of change. The crowd roars in response, their voices rising in solidarity. The energy is electric, powerful, and unwavering. Maria glances over at Jasmine, her eyes shining with pride. Maria, grinning, look at this. Look at what you started. Jasmine, smiling, it's not just me anymore. It's all of us. The scene is one of collective power, a symbol of a movement that has spread across the nation. The fight for justice is no longer just a local issue. It has become a cause that unites the country. Later that evening, a strategy meeting at a community center. Jasmine, Maria, and Attorney Williams sit at a table surrounded by activists, policy experts, and reform advocates. Large posters with slogans like "Defund the police," "Fund the community," and "No justice, no peace" hang on the walls. Jasmine, determined, it's not enough to just call for reform. We need clear policies that address the root causes of police violence. Racial profiling, militarization, lack of accountability, and the failure to train officers in de-escalation techniques. Attorney Williams, nodding, we need to push for legislation that mandates independent investigations into all police misconduct cases, stronger oversight boards, and a nationwide database of police misconduct. A policy expert chimes in, holding up a proposal for a new law, the Police Accountability Act. Policy expert, gesturing, this bill will mandate that all police departments across the country implement body cameras, create civilian oversight committees, and ensure that every officer receives anti-bias and de-escalation training. Jasmine, focused, we can't wait. Every day that we don't act, another life is at risk. We need to push lawmakers. We need to push the people in power to take action. We can't let them ignore us anymore. The group nods in agreement, the weight of their work ahead heavy on their shoulders, but tempered with a sense of purpose. The next scene is a nationwide broadcast, where Jasmine appears on a popular news show. The host, Brittany Rose, a journalist known for her in-depth reporting on civil rights issues, introduces her. Brittany Rose, smiling, our next guest is someone whose story has captivated the nation and sparked a movement. Jasmine Smith, the woman at the center of the case that exposed a nationwide issue of police brutality, is here with us tonight. Jasmine, thank you for being here. Jasmine, calmly, thank you for having me. Brittany Rose, leaning in, your case has been a rallying point for so many people, Jasmine. But beyond the trial and the victory, what's next? What are we looking at in terms of real change? Jasmine, passionately, we've seen some progress, yes, but the real fight is far from over. We need to shift the conversation from just punishment for bad cops to an entire transformation of how law enforcement operates. It's about creating systems that are truly accountable to the people, systems that don't treat certain communities like they're disposable. She pauses for a moment, her eyes focused on the camera, as if speaking directly to the millions watching at home. Jasmine, firmly, this isn't just about making noise. This is about creating real change, not just on the streets, but in the halls of power, in the policies that govern our lives. I won't stop until we get that. The camera cuts to a television panel featuring opposing views. On one side, Jasmine's supporters, including activists and reform advocates, argue passionately about the need for accountability and transparency in police forces across the country. On the other side, law enforcement representatives and conservative commentators argue against defunding the police, claiming that such measures would undermine public safety. Police representative, firmly, we support accountability, but we cannot allow the radical defunding of the police. Officers need the resources and support to do their jobs effectively. Jasmine's supporter, countering, it's not about defunding police, it's about reallocating resources. We need to invest in communities, in education, in mental health services, in things that keep people safe. The current system isn't working, and it's time for a change. The debate grows heated as both sides dig in their heels. The tension in the room is palpable as the debate reflects the nation's deep divide on the issue of policing and reform. Later that night, Jasmine walks through a quiet park, her thoughts heavy, the weight of everything that has happened, the trial, the protests, the media attention, the national debate, is beginning to settle on her shoulders. She stops at a bench and sits, staring up at the sky. Maria walks up beside her and sits down. Maria, gently, you okay? Jasmine, sighing, it's just so much. I thought this would be over when the verdict came in. But this is bigger than I imagined. And I don't know if I'm ready for all of it. Maria nods, understanding the burden Jasmine carries. Maria, softly, you don't have to carry it alone. We're in this together. All of us. Jasmine looks over at her, a small but grateful smile forming. Jasmine, thanks Maria, for everything. Two women sitting side by side. A small but powerful moment of solidarity in the midst of a nation's reckoning. Jasmine standing on a podium at a rally, surrounded by thousands of people. It's a moment of triumph, but the journey is far from over. Jasmine speaks into a microphone, her voice strong and unwavering. Jasmine, passionately, this is just the beginning. We fought for justice, and we've won. But now, we must fight for change. For every person who has suffered, for every life lost. We will not stop. We will continue until the system works for all of us. The crowd erupts into applause, showing the power of the movement she's helped lead. Jasmine stands tall, not just as a survivor, but as a beacon of hope, strength, and change. Next day in a Senate office, where Jasmine is meeting with Senator Thompson, who has become an unexpected ally in the fight for police reform. The room is lined with bookshelves and large windows that overlook the city. The senator is flipping through a stack of papers, drafts of new legislation focused on police accountability and civilian oversight. Senator Thompson, looking over at Jasmine, I've been in this game a long time, but I've never seen anything like what you've started. You've got people listening. Now we just need to make sure the right people are in the room when we make the decisions. Jasmine nods, sitting across from him, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Jasmine, firmly, it's not about just talking anymore. We need concrete action. Policies that ensure no one else goes through what I did. No more excuses. Senator Thompson, nodding, and we're close. The bill on independent oversight and body cameras is moving, but I need your voice on the ground. Your ability to rally people, to keep pushing. This is going to be a battle. The opposition is strong. Jasmine, resolutely, I didn't come this far to back down. If we're going to change the system, we need to fight like hell. I'm ready. The senator smiles, clearly impressed by her resolve. Senator Thompson, good, because the real fight is still ahead of us. But with you leading, I believe we can get it done. The scene transitions to a large rally in a public park. The atmosphere is electric with anticipation. People from all walks of life are gathered, holding signs, chanting, and showing their support for police reform. The camera pans across the crowd, capturing the faces of activists, families, students, and community leaders. At the front of the stage, a banner reads, "Reclaiming Justice, Reform the System." Jasmine steps up to the microphone, her presence commanding. She looks out at the crowd, seeing the faces of people who have been inspired by her fight, people who have come to rally around the cause of police accountability and justice for all. Jasmine, addressing the crowd, this isn't just about me. It's about every person who's been hurt, overlooked, or brutalized by a system that was supposed to protect them. Today, we take one step closer to the justice we all deserve. The crowd cheers in response, their voices filled with passion. Jasmine, continuing, we're not going to stop. We won't let the power of the system silence us. We will keep pushing until every officer who abuses their power is held accountable. We will keep fighting until this system works for all of us. The crowd erupts into applause and chants of justice now. Jasmine's voice grows louder as she finishes her speech. Jasmine, fiercely, we've come too far to turn back. This is just the beginning. Together, we are unstoppable. As the crowd chants in unison, the camera zooms out, capturing the full magnitude of the movement that has taken root across the nation. Later that evening, Jasmine is at home, sitting in front of her mirror, her face reflecting a mixture of exhaustion and determination. She stares at herself for a long moment, touching the scars on her face lightly. The sound of the front door opening interrupts her reverie, and Maria enters, holding a bag of takeout. Maria, grinning, I brought dinner. You need to eat. You've been out there all day. Jasmine smiles faintly, then looks at her reflection again. Jasmine, softly, I never thought it would come to this, that I would become the face of all of this. It's overwhelming sometimes. Maria, sitting down beside her, it's a lot, I know, but look at what you've done. Look at what we've done. You've made people listen. You've given a voice to the voiceless. Jasmine turns toward Maria, her expression softening. Jasmine, I didn't ask for any of this, but now that I'm here, I can't turn back. Maria, smiling, and you won't. You've already changed the world, Jasmine, and you're just getting started. Jasmine nods, a new sense of resolve settling in her chest. She reaches for her phone and checks the news. A new headline reads, Senate bill on police reform gains momentum after national protests. She looks up at Maria, a small smile tugging at her lips. Jasmine, it's happening. Maria raises a fist in the air, jokingly mimicking a victory pose. Maria, hell yeah, it is. In the police union headquarters, the scene shifts to a closed-door meeting. Officer Smith, now a former cop, sits at a table with several high-ranking members of the union, including its president, Frank Dawson. The room is filled with tension. Frank Dawson, gruffly, the movement's picking up steam, and we need to push back. People like Jasmine Smith are making this a political issue. We can't let them paint all cops with the same brush. Officer Smith, resentful, I didn't sign up for any of this. They're trying to ruin my life over one mistake. Union president, sternly, you're not the only one in danger. This is bigger than your case. We've got lawmakers and activists pushing for things that could dismantle everything we've worked for. We need to make sure we don't lose our power. Smith clenches his fists, the frustration palpable. Officer Smith, muttering, I just want my badge back. Union president, coldly, we'll fight for you. But you need to stay out of the public eye. We don't need more bad press. The camera lingers on Smith's face, his anger and bitterness clear. His path forward is uncertain, but it's obvious he's not done with the fight. The stakes have grown higher, and he's determined to push back. The scene shifts to a conference room where Jasmine is meeting with Senator Thompson, Attorney Williams, and a few key advisors to discuss the next steps in the push for reform. The conversation is tense as they weigh the political landscape. Attorney Williams, concerned, the opposition is getting stronger. The police unions are pushing back hard, and some senators are starting to waver. They're framing this as an attack on all law enforcement, not just bad actors. Jasmine, gritting her teeth, we can't let them distort the message. This isn't about all cops. It's about the ones who break the law and get away with it. We need to focus on the fact that accountability is not just an option, it's a necessity. Senator Thompson, nodding, we have to turn this into a bipartisan issue. We need both sides to see that real reform isn't just possible, it's critical for the future of our country. Jasmine, leaning forward, and I'll keep fighting. I'll make sure they can't ignore us. The camera zooms out as the meeting continues, the stakes higher than ever. Jasmine's determination and unwavering stance have become the backbone of a movement that is starting to face its greatest challenges yet. The fight for justice is far from over. After weeks of intense lobbying, public pressure, and negotiations, senators are gathered in the chamber for a vote on the Police Accountability Act. The tension is palpable as Jasmine, along with Maria, Attorney Williams, and a handful of reform advocates, watches from the gallery. Senator Thompson, standing at the podium, the people of this country have spoken. They have demanded change. Today, we answer that call. The vote is cast. The camera captures the results. It passes. The significant reform bill is set to become law. The room erupts into applause from those who have fought tirelessly for this moment. Jasmine, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, grips Maria's hand tightly. Jasmine, whispering, we did it. We actually did it. Maria pulls her into a tight hug, overwhelmed with emotion. The battle is not yet won, but this is a monumental victory, one that will have ripple effects for years to come. The final moment shows a community meeting in a neighborhood, still healing from decades of police violence. Jasmine is standing before a group of young activists and residents, listening as they discuss how the reforms are starting to take effect. There are signs of change. Body cameras are now mandatory, independent oversight committees are being formed, and training on de-escalation and bias is becoming the standard. Jasmine, reflecting, it wasn't easy. It still won't be. But this is just the beginning. Change takes time, and it takes all of us. The camera lingers on the faces of those gathered. Young people, parents, community leaders. A collective vision for a better future. The final shot is of Jasmine, standing tall, knowing her fight is far from over, but filled with hope for the world she helped create.